Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. The presidential candidate for Bolivia's Más EPSP party, Luis Arce Catacora, has left the prosecutor's office in La Paz following the suspension of the hearing. Prosecutors suspended the hearing after 3 hours due to procedural mistakes. This included the delivery of the subpoena to Arce just minutes after he arrived at the Altos airport from Argentina and before he passed through immigration. Arce and his lawyers have also yet to be made aware of the exact accusations against him and of any proof that links him to the alleged crimes. Upon his exit from the court, Arce was lifted up by supporters who had been waiting for him outside.
He venido a declarar porque yo no tengo nada.
Nothing to hide. I am not corrupt. I am not a thief. Lawyers and the prosecutor herself have noticed errors in the procedure, in how I was notified. Neither myself nor my lawyers have had access to the investigation to know exactly of what I'm being accused of. What is the alleged crime I have committed? Based on this case, I should have knowledge of at least 40 processes and more than 70 annexes. But thankfully, I was next to several members of the UN Human Rights High Commission.
Our correspondent Freddy Morales reports from La Paz.
The public prosecutor of La Paz suspended the hearing of Más Party presidential candidate Luis Arce without any future date due to procedural errors in the trial, including in the judicial notice which he received yesterday at the El Alto airport, which was handed to him before he even reached migration. Arce and his defense must first be made aware of the procedure within 40 bodies and another 70 annexes. This means they must know first which are the charges laid against him and with what evidence.
Moving on, in Colombia, Darío Herrera, another former FARC combatant, has been murdered in the state of Antioquia. Herrera was heading to the reincorporation site in Ituango, Antioquia, where he was shot with a firearm. 5 former FARC combatants have been murdered this month alone. The FARC took to Twitter to condemn the murder while stating that there are no means of protection for the former FARC combatants that are part of the reintegration process, blaming the government for failing to uphold its end of the peace deal. And still in Colombia, victims of the armed conflicts can have a representation at the parliament despite opposition from the government's political party. That is, if the president upholds the mandate of the 2016 peace agreements. More on this report.
2 years ago, the approval for the victims of the armed conflicts to have representation in Congress was denied, in spite of the peace agreement signed in Havana, Cuba. Officials said it could not be approved due to a lack of votes. In 2020, opposition lawmakers are once again demanding that right for the 16 victims of the most conflict-ridden areas in Colombia.
It was unfair for them to revoke the decision because there were no votes, and it should be sent to the president so the law can be passed as soon as possible. The Electoral Council must also announce the day for elections within the constitutional timeline so that the 16 victims can have a seat at the House of Representatives.
Both peace promoters and lawmakers agreed there is no legal impediment to prevent President Iván Duque from signing this law. However, his political party, the Democratic Center, has been opposed to its implementation, with some ensuring that they remain close to Duque to make certain that the agreement does not come to fruition.
We hope there is no opposition, but we know it's been tradition for the governing party and its allies who are hoping to rule to criticize the deal, and we expect that they will put forward any measures to prevent the law. But the most important thing is that we believe it will happen and that it must be followed through for the well-being of the nation, of democracy, and to encourage reconciliation and coexistence.
The National Victims Organization has expressed concern that they are not safe under this government, as it constantly opposes the application of the peace agreements. The organization also strongly rejects reform proposals that have been put forward by political parties and the armed forces.
Based on the government's proposals, only political parties will have representations, while the victims will stay on the sidelines. But it was agreed to in Havana that there will be 16 representatives from the areas where the armed conflict was the most severe. To leave out the victims is totally absurd, and it's totally inconceivable. That is not what was discussed and agreed to in Havana.
It is expected that President Duque will sign the deal without objection or adding reforms that will go against the agreements, bearing in mind that his legislation has already been approved.
250 Venezuelan migrants are set to return home under the Return to the Homeland humanitarian plan from Peru. Our correspondent has more from Lima.
I am here in Jorge Chávez International Airport in Lima, where 250 Venezuelans are about to board a plane that will take them back to Venezuela. This, thanks to the Vuelta a la Patria humanitarian plan, which is being reactivated after 3 months and a half of it being suspended due to the economic blockade against Venezuela. Nonetheless, the Bolivarian government has been able to reactivate this plan not only in Peru, but in numerous countries. Countries including Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, and of course Peru. Up until now, 17,000 Venezuelan migrants have been able to return to their country thanks to this plan, and from Peru, 3,800 Venezuelans have left the country. This flight is the first of the 9 flights that we will see in January. It is expected that more than 2,250 Venezuelans will return to their country of origin with these flights, but the waiting list is even longer. Nonetheless, according to Venezuela's consul here in Peru, the trip of all the people on the waiting list is guaranteed. The plan will remain during all of 2020 for any Venezuelan who wants to return to their country. That's good news.
We thank Veronica for that report. The Peruvian community in Venezuela has rejected statements made by Perus Interior Minister labeling Venezuelan migrants in Peru as criminals, and also the announcement of a migrant hunting special unit. Let's have a look.
These are the declarations made by Peru's Interior Minister that sparked controversy.
These foreign criminals, these Venezuelans that enter our country to commit crimes, they only have 2 options: go to jail or leave the country.
Moran made these statements during a promotional video for the National Police, where he announced the creation of a migrant hunting special unit. The announcements were made while ignoring the fact that crime figures in Peru show that a mere 1.8% are committed by Venezuelans.
The unit will be focused primarily on fighting drug trafficking, kidnapping, violent crimes, and all other crimes that foreign citizens commit.
His statements were immediately condemned by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. They consider that messages that equate migration with criminality promote the stigmatization of Venezuelan nationals. As such, Moran's words seek to blame crime rates only on migrants. Venezuelan authorities also labeled the declarations as a xenophobic act and a violation against human rights that go against international norms, especially since around 800,000 Venezuelans live in Peru. The declarations raised concerns among the Peruvian community in Venezuela, like, for example, this Peruvian migrant who built his local restaurant and decided to stay in Caracas with his 3 children and 6 grandchildren.
I thank Commander Hugo Chavez because when I came to Venezuela, he welcomed us with open arms and helped us. I've been working here for 13 years. What is happening in Peru is a political strategy, because elections are coming up and that is why they are marginalizing Venezuelans.
In all countries, there are good and bad people. I don't think it's fair to generalize. I don't agree with a statement that calls Venezuelans thieves.
Peruvians are the 3rd biggest migrant colony in Venezuela, where migrants from all continents have historically been welcome.
Since I can remember, there have been foreigners. I have grown up with them, but I don't see the acceptance being the same in other countries.
Venezuelans are no different from anybody. We are the same as Chinese, Africans, Jews, everyone here. Anyone is free to come and do whatever they want.
It's due to these xenophobic attacks and a lack of opportunities that more than 15,000 Venezuelans have decided to return home in a program promoted by the government of President Nicolás Maduro.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A new migrant refugee caravan will be taken out from El Salvador with close to 8,000 people trying to reach the United States. It is expected that the caravan will arrive to Mexico's southern border by next weekend. Activists and human rights defenders say that the National Migration Institute's strategy to stop the migrant flow violates human rights. He also said that local political leaders recommend that migrants organize in order to defend their human rights collectively. Mexico deported scores of Central American migrants who were arrested after hundreds forced their way through a Mexican police blockade and headed for the United States. Around 500 men, women, and children, part of a caravan of roughly 5,000, mainly Hondurans, who have been trekking towards the U.S. for weeks, scrambled over a rusted metal fence and surged into a concrete riverbed towards San Diego on Sunday. Mexico's National Institute of Migration Commissioner Gerardo Garcia confirmed the 98 arrests on his country's side, saying they were instigators in the migrant caravan pushing people to illegally cross the border. Moving on, protests against Trump's so-called Middle East peace plan have been ongoing across the occupied Palestinian territories. On Wednesday, demonstrators gathered in Al-Kabia, north of the Jordan Valley, to express their anger at the United States and Israel for their continued attempts at removing them from their lands. Demonstrations are expected to continue throughout the week. Residents in the Gaza Strip have also spoken out against the U.S. and Israel.
We call on the Palestinian factions to unite to face this alleged deal of the century. We as Palestinians absolutely reject it, in all its details, decisions and plans.
We do not recognize the deal of the century, as well as we do not recognize the US nor Israel. Every person decides his fate, and we, as Palestinians, are a united people. The US cannot discuss this deal of shame. We are against this deal.
Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Palestinian refugees burned down the flags of the United States and Israel in protest to Trump's plan. Several organizations and movements, including the Arab League, strongly condemn the U.S. and Israel, saying their work lacks all principles required to achieve peace. In Turkey, a group of protesters gathered in front of the U.S. consulate in Istanbul to reject this attack on Palestinian sovereignty.
What they call the deal of the century will supposedly bring peace to the Middle East, but we will see an insurgency of the century against this agreement, which support and legitimize Israel's century of occupation. We will make efforts in Turkey to increase this insurgency. Zionist Israel should pay the price for the war crimes it has committed internationally. Sanctions must be imposed against Zionist Israel, and we defend the need of a boycott of Zionist Israel in every sector: economic, military, diplomatic, cultural.
Meanwhile, South Africa's governing party, the African National Congress, or ANC, says any plan that does not have the input of Palestinians cannot bring peace to the Middle East. A statement by the former Liberation Movement said the plan announced by Trump has no legitimacy and will only increase tension in the region. The ANC has also reiterated its unequivocal support for the Palestinian people's struggle for freedom and self-determination. It added that in protest against Israel's atrocities, the party's decision to downgrade the country's embassy in Tel Aviv to a liaison office will remain in place. And people in Yemen also joined the growing criticism of Trump's Middle East proposal.
The Republic of Yemen condemns yesterday's show on the deal of the century, and the statement of the Yemeni Foreign Ministry was very clear. And I repeat it again. Anything that detracts from the rights of the Palestinian people, we reject it and condemn it, as a Yemeni people who is fighting with Palestinian people.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. The National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, NUMSA, has appealed to the government to come to the aid struggling electronics manufacturer in the Eastern Cape province. The union says failure by the government will not only affect the workers and their families, but will have an impact on the entire economy of the region. The company that launched in 2018 as part of the efforts to improve the fortunes of one of the country's economically disadvantaged regions is facing liquidation after it failed to repay $20 million loan obtained from a local bank. Residents from Zimbabwe's second largest city face serious water shortages as local dams are running dry. Due to ongoing drought in the past few years, water sources around Bulawayo have dried up and residents have been forced to use water from unsafe sources. They are calling on the government to declare the situation a national disaster. Zimbabwe has been one of the most drought-affected nations in southern Africa due to climate change.
We have no option. Yeah, this water is dangerous. As you can see, just check. Someone did his rubbish here. There's nothing that we can do, you see. Yeah, but we still have to, because we need some water to use at home.
Actually, we're projecting that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we might lose the third dam, which is Lower Nyama. It's currently sitting just above 10% in terms of capacity. And we have also put together a paper to government for us to be declared as a water shortage area.
A group of people have protested outside the United Arab Emirates Embassy in Sudan against the alleged trafficking of local men who have been recruited to join the militias of renegade Libyan General Khalifa Haftar. Demonstrators are accusing a company from the UAE of being involved in the scheme. This after the United Nations revealed that cargo and freight company Black Shield was colluding with a Sudanese general to recruit poor young men under the guise of offering them jobs as security guards in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Haftar's so-called Libyan National Army, LNA, is preparing to launch a major offensive against forces loyal to the United Nations recognized government of national accord. LNA field commanders say they are waiting for senior officials to give the order for forces to advance towards the west to take over towns currently under the control of the GNA. On Sunday, the GNA accused Haftar of violating this ceasefire signed in Moscow 2 weeks ago.
We are awaiting the instructions of the General Command so we can approach this corrupt group of Syrians who deal with artillery, Grad artillery. We are monitoring them and know their locations and how they move and work. Mercenaries from the Chadian Justice and Equality Movement are also fighting alongside them, but we, God willing, we monitor all their movements, and very soon any orders or instructions issued by the General Command, they will be eliminated as soon as possible, God willing.
Chinese authorities say that just under 6,000 confirmed cases of pneumonia caused by the novel coronavirus have been reported as of Wednesday, with the death toll rising to 132. 65 cases of the coronavirus have also been confirmed outside of the Asian nation. The streets of major cities across China have become virtually deserted as prevention measures remain in full effect. 30 cities and provinces have launched a level 1 emergency response, while Hong Kong declared its highest emergency response.
Coronavirus prevention is definitely our top priority. The economy is a small matter for a country as big as ours. Everyone has contributed to prevention costs. Many enterprises and successful people are donating money to the infected areas. The money is not a big deal for our country.
Meanwhile, the 2 new emergency hospitals being built in the city of Wuhan are soon to be finished. Both hospitals will be fully dedicated to the treatment of patients infected with the coronavirus. Doctors in Wuhan, the city of 11 million people where the virus was first detected, had described overcrowded facilities and a shortage of test kits, protective gear, and other medical equipment. In response, authorities announced the construction of the first building on January 24th, and it is expected to be fully operational by February 3rd.
At this point, I'm basically working from 7 a.m. in the morning until midnight, with a 1 or 2 hour break in between, and on a 24-hour standby.
The World Health Organization has hailed China's response to the new coronavirus. Speaking at a media briefing in Geneva, Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said the measures taken by China has reduced the spread of the virus to other countries. The health agency's Director for Emergency Services said health authorities in all parts of the world need to be on alert and work together to contain the virus.
The level of commitment from China is incredible. Some people on social media, I will be open with you, were criticizing for praising China. I will praise China again and again because its actions actually helped in reducing the spread of coronavirus to other countries.
But the whole world needs to be on alert now. The whole world needs to take action and be ready for any cases that come, either from the original epicenter or from other epicenters that become established.
The president of Catalonia, Quim Torra, has called for snap parliamentary elections after the budget plan for the year was approved. His announcement came just a few days after he was stripped of his rights as a regional lawmaker by a Spanish court.
Once the conditions have been approved in Parliament, I will announce the date of the elections, and I will do so according to what is best for the country. It is under this criteria that I will decide when the elections will take place, which will serve as a new democratic mandate to advance towards a country of democracy, justice, and freedom.
France's biggest union is planning to continue protests against the government's proposed pension reforms until the bill is withdrawn. This as demonstrations escalate, with other sectors joining the strike.
This government is trying to force its way through and is now using truncheons and intimidation against activists, strikers and demonstrators, particularly from the CGT. It is good that the government is desperate, that it is afraid. Well, we are going to tell them again today that the majority of citizens and employees will be mobilized until this bill is withdrawn.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.